There's two problems with going last. One is by the time you get to this point, everyone's a bit mentally fried because of the amount of sheer download that you've had, which has been fantastic, but I'm conscious that everyone will be experiencing a little bit of brain fog right now. The second thing is that you're typically given the stage to start at the time that the schedule says that you need to have finished. So I'm under pressure to shave about 5 minutes off this, so I'll do my best. Here's what I want to do. I'm not going to give you a ton more download because your head is probably swimming with lists and stuff to do and urgent things to get back to the office. And I know that we're all starting to check phones as well and see things kind of creep into the inbox. So I'm not going to give you more download. I am going to make a case, however. I thought there was a bit of a legal theme today. We've got a co-sponsor who's a solicitor. We're talking a lot about law. I want to make the case that actually, even though this session is about succession planning, we absolutely shouldn't be talking about succession planning. It's a bit of a bait and switch. Succession planning is not helpful, useful, valuable in terms of the language to use to attack the problem that we really want to attack. And that's the case I want to make. And hopefully just leave you with a thought to ponder as opposed to a list to do. First of all, let's play a little bit of a game. I think, who's ever been to an HR event or a conference before? Yeah? Okay, pretty much everybody. Yeah, you've been to events like this before. Yeah? Nobody's new here. You could probably write this presentation. There's a very predictable way that we typically tend to talk about succession planning and that you would expect me and Guy or Rich or any of us as a provider to say, here's what you should do or here's what you should be thinking about. So the game I'd like to play is just, I'm going to present a few slides and see if these are the slides that you might have expected. Yeah? Because if I was going to do a normal presentation on succession planning, I would probably start with some death statistics. Yeah? So we would get some statistics out from some semi-credible but half-believable sources, which would say, 69% of privately owned businesses have no documented succession plan. And we would all nod in sad recognition. Yeah? And then we could go on and talk about the problem that we have in the industry of the aging workforce and the fact that, the average age of a board director or a director of in agri or food is about 59. And it's like, we've got a real problem with young talent. Yeah, to stir up some urgency. That could then kind of give you a false promise to say, who knows how they got this stat. But PwC are in their 13th year of doing annual global, not just UK, but global no less, family business surveys. And they say if you do succession planning well, 2 to 3 times long-term performance. How on earth have they ever measured that? But I would give you some of those slides to kind of stir up some agitation. And then, now I've got your attention, we could then get on to, right, but how do you solve this? And I would give you a magic little 5-step formula, which would sound very nice and professional and HR-y, yeah? Where you could say, well, first you do this, and then we do that, and then we do the other, and then you will have a fantastic succession plan that's going to sustain the long-term performance of your business. I would give you a soft sell talking about myself and all the rest of the team and how brilliant and experienced we are, yeah? And then I would move into talking about the different offers that we have and the fact that any of you can go onto the website and learn about all of them straight away, and then tell you about all the great brands that we work with. Would that be the presentation you would expect? Because you've been to events like this before, haven't you? Right, okay, so can we all just pretend that I've given the 20-minute version of that presentation, but I've done it in 3 minutes, given us, 12 minutes back now, yeah? And do something a little bit more meaningful, because I don't want the kind of just polite but slightly indifferent applause at the end, which we've all been trained to do by rubbish stock photos like this, yeah? Because I don't know about you, I would be bored of a presentation like that, because I was certainly bored writing it. So let's do something different instead. Easter's nearly here. Anyone like mini eggs? Okay. It's never too early to give away some chocolate. Let's do something different. Anyone recognize that? Who is he? Okay, what's the film? Who wrote The Great Gatsby? Who said that? Oh, you would have to be at the back, wouldn't you? Right. Okay. Round of applause for Dave. Okay. Okay, F. Scott Fitzgerald was the author of The Great Gatsby. So F. Scott Fitzgerald was an author, grew up in the Roaring '20s, was through the Great Depression, fascinating character, not just a novelist. And he wrote down a quote which really expresses one of the two ideas that I want to give you today that has informed my journey most as a professional, whether that's leading an operation or whether that's delivering change, which I've done, or now leading in boardrooms. There's two ideas that have informed that more than anything else. And one of them is expressed in a quote by F. Scott Fitzgerald, who wrote in an essay, and I think it was 1931, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the same mind and still retain the ability to function." I know that's a long quote, yeah? The test of a first-rate intelligence is to be able to hold two opposing ideas, to manage that cognitive dissonance of, well, there's two things that don't seem like they should go together, but they absolutely do. Yeah, there's wisdom in the opposite. No matter how sure you are of a thing, the opposite thing to that probably has some validity. Yeah, you following me? Yeah, is the fog still there? All right, I'm trying to cut through a little bit, okay? The test of first-rate intelligence is being able to hold two ideas that are opposite. Let me layer on a different metaphor to make the point. When we talk about succession planning, there's two opposite things we need to be talking about, okay? And if you don't like that, if you don't like Leo DiCaprio, I mean, why would you? He's interesting. Think about this idea. You know the story of the Trojan horse? Yeah? So it looks appealing, yeah, and inviting on the outside, but it's got loads of hidden dangers inside, right? Succession planning for me is kind of like this because when we use the language of succession planning, one, it's incredibly dangerous. I'll just call it, it's dangerous to open up Pandora's box and say, we're doing succession planning, right? For a good few reasons, but at the same time, it is absolutely essential. Two opposing things are true at once, okay? And in our roles, where most of the time we're alongside the people that we care about and love and are trying to influence, we don't have the formal power, but we're trying to coach or cajole or influence practice. Sometimes the best thing that we can do is just bring some realism to what's going on, to name and label, yeah, the thing and get the real thing on the table, all right? Because if your business is going to talk about succession planning, it has to have its eyes open to at least three things, okay? And Rich mentioned the exec dinners that we do. I was at one the other day, and we were actually talking about succession planning. And I had little side chats with people around the table, and all of these things came up. Here's some dangers around when you talk about succession planning. Number one is that it creates some kind of clock with expectations attached. It just does, doesn't it? As soon as you launch something where it's like, right, in 5 years' time, we know we've got X, Y, Z retiring, so we need to do this. Instantly, people can't help it. They get onto a clock. Yeah? And there's some expectations set, which now just starts to sow some instability. Okay, so that's danger number one. Danger number two is it kind of, we often don't think about the person who is being succeeded. To them, it can sometimes feel like we're communicating, oh, this person's already done. Yeah, they're past it. Yeah, they need replacement. Because that's the frame that succession planning has. It's one of replacement. Who is going to succeed this thing, this person, yeah, that needs to be replaced. And that's not nice and can sabotage things before you even get going. Third thing is, and you'll know this because you'll probably have seen it, it sets people up inside the business to start acting as if they're in competition with each other. When of course what we want is for people to be collaborating and working well and solving problems for the business. No, now I'm on show. I'm performing for the next couple of years because I'm already trying to get that thing. Is this making sense? Okay. Now, how many of you have kind of maybe seen or felt this before, but you've never had language for it? Yeah, you've certainly not got it on the table. I think we need to. Yeah, I think we need to. Because this is why succession planning goes poorly. Okay? Now, it's still absolutely essential, and I'm going to give you some ideas as to what to do instead. All right? But let's have our eyes wide open, yeah, to the dangers and the downsides. Absolutely essential. Again, you know this. Okay? Both personal and organizational growth drives retention. That's not rocket science. That's not new to any of you. Yeah? We know that we want people to be growing. We want our business to be growing because that keeps fantastic folk around. Okay? So in a sense, we do have to be doing succession planning because people need to see that they've got somewhere to go and that the business has ambition and it's thinking long term. Yeah? The second thing is, and this is cute, somebody said to me once, sustainability is much more than your carbon audit. All right? Sustainability absolutely is part of the conversation in terms of the leadership team, isn't it? How do we ensure sustainability of who is running the show, yeah, over the long period of time that we can see this business having a horizon, right? So when we talk about stability or sustainability, we have to be thinking 2-3 years in advance. Who's going to take over? Who is moving into key positions? Do we have the wider leadership capability to cope with all the challenges that are coming at us in the industry? Yeah? Talent is part of the sustainability question. And the third thing, I was chatting to an owner the other day who's been through a couple of exits, and he's made a ton of money, right? A lot of people that, in our industry are, you set up a business, you have a family business for a while, and you either sell out to PE, or you do a trade sale, or what you do a management buyout, whatever. Often that's in the mix, right? But for those people, let's get real, it's not just about the money. There's a legacy play that they want to have where they feel, do you know what, I left great people behind me, And when you speak to folk, who have been through successful, quote unquote, succession planning exercises, yes, of course, it's lovely to leave with a couple of million in the bank, but what's really important to folk is that they feel like, what I'm most proud of is actually the COO that took over, yeah? Or the team behind me are actually pushing it onto the thing that I could never have done, right? So for all those reasons, succession planning is still important. Are you still with me? Yes? Okay. Right. So what to do? All right, here's the case. I would love us all to just remove, you have to use it because people know what you mean, right? But in this room, I would love us to lose the language of succession planning because it has that frame of replacement, because it has those dangers attached to it, yeah? We don't need to be talking about succession planning, we need to be talking about executive development, right? Because we need to be developing the executive layer of our organization. Our talent problem isn't just at the ground level. Yes, we have challenges in getting young people into the industry. Yes, we have challenges attracting folk in at every level, okay? But there is an acute, really interesting bit in our industry at the minute where the next 5-10 years, a lot of fantastic people are going to be retiring, yeah? Are going to be selling out. And to be honest, food security in the UK is too important to leave that to chance or just do what we talked about before, which is make loads of panic hires. Yeah? Let's not do that. So let's develop the executive capability within our businesses. For my money, and something I'll give you as a consideration, the best way to do that is not to outsource developing your leaders to a business school, right? How many of you have done that? You kind of, there's this rising talent, there's these rising stars, right? We'll send him on that program, we'll give her a mentor, we'll do this over there, and it's all piecemeal, yeah? And folk are going in different directions. But what have we said we want to strengthen? Collaboration. We need to be developing people not generically, but in the business, together, on problems that make a difference now and set them up for the future. Make sense? That's best achieved through some kind of internal cohort program, yeah? Where for maybe 6-10 months, you take people on a bit of an intensive journey. You say, right, we are going to solve some problems together, we're going to give you some support, right, but this is all about getting you ready for not just these roles in the future, but just being a better leader, being more strategic, carrying more weight. Yeah? That's the practical thing. And to do that, you want to develop the 3 buckets of exec capability. All right, here's a little bit of a gift for you, and these slides are going to go out. Not to name drop, but to totally name drop. I'm doing a bit of work with Chanel at the minute. And unfortunately, my wife's very disappointed that we don't get discounts on bags and eau de parfum, but we do get to hang out in their nice offices sometimes. So this is Vincent. Vincent is the Chief Digital Officer of Chanel, and I interviewed him for a podcast that we do. One of the things he said really struck me, and to be honest, it wasn't just him. Pretty much every guest that we've had on has said something similar. He said, we climb the ladder at getting good at the thing, but the hardest point in our careers is when we realize the higher you climb, the less relevant the thing is. Yeah, you get what he's getting at there? Okay? The first half of our career is spent getting brilliant at normally some kind of technical skill set. Yeah, we become a brilliant accountant, yeah, solicitor, operations lead, warehouse manager, insert agronomist, insert specialism of choice, right? And that gets us to a decent level of manager head of, okay? But how many of you know that you don't need a better accountant as your next FD? Yeah, your next FD doesn't need to be the best accountant in the room. Your next sales director shouldn't necessarily be the best salesperson, should they? Okay? Because there's a whole host of different skill sets and capabilities that you need at that executive tier. So I think about these 3 buckets. First of all, yes, of course, fill up and earn your stripes to get very good at the technical and delivery stuff. All right? But you as people who are purchasing and shaping leadership development programs, please don't sell, just more technical competence, because that runs out and gets less relevant the higher you climb. You get to bucket number 2, which you know, which is more people and projects, right? How do I lead change? How do I manage staff? How do I keep people with me, right? And how do I have this collaboration skill set kick in? Because I'm used to leading my function, my warehouse, my thing, and I'm very bloody good over here. Oh, but now I've got to be friends with marketing. And now you're going to ask me to talk to that region. And hang on, I've got to collaborate with the... Piss off, that's, you know, right? How many of you know people like that in your business? Right? But that kind of collaborative skill set is enormous at the executive layer, yeah? And then the third thing is strategy and stakeholders. Think about it like this. Most people at the executive level, you don't fire them or they don't fail because they're not technically good enough. Yeah, you fire them or they fail because of stakeholder issues. Yeah, they fall out with the board, they lose confidence of the peers. Yeah, something happens with stakeholders, that's what gets rid of people. So let's reverse engineer that. Why aren't we developing that? You know, over the course of a career, why aren't we helping them fill bucket number 3 and getting very good at doing strategy and working with stakeholders? Yeah, we need to be developing those 3 buckets. And please, let me just rant against my own field for a second. Don't ever buy leadership training, right? It's kind of an oxymoron, right? You don't train leaders. Like, leaders don't get trained by giving them a handbook with a spiral bound, teaching them how to do SWOT analysis and having Tuckman's model in it. Let me tell you about forming, storming. We've moved past that, right? And particularly at the executive layer, that's not what development is. Yeah, nobody really grows in a classroom. Yeah, they get grown by supported high-stakes exposure. All right, that's a different one I'll give you for free. All right, here's something else for free. Second bag of mini eggs, interested? Ooh, who's this? And you really deserve this if you know who it is. Okay, guess his profession. I'll give you that. You can see the quote. What might his profession be? Who said that? Bingo. It is Thomas Sowell. Very good. Give him a clap. The second idea that has shaped me more than anything else is this. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. No matter how good you think your idea is, there's always downsides. We don't get to avoid cost, risk, downside. We don't. Every single thing we do, whether it's at the level of a nation, or as a business, or as an individual, or as a family, like every choice we make has trade-offs, has downsides. Okay? And it's about being alert to what those downsides are. Yeah? That's what makes you smart as you go through life, or at least that's what Thomas Sowell kind of makes a case for, and I believe him, right? Often we get too attached to an idea and we get very dogmatic because we think that's right, that's how it should be. And we never talk about the downsides. The more we do, the smarter we are. Yeah? The reason that I bring that up is this, okay? I'm doing a bit of work with a big food producer at the minute. Basically, it's conflict resolution. The board is kind of at each other's throats, breakdown with the exec, real challenges, yeah? And of course, we go in, and it's the equivalent on the development side of like a panic hire, yeah? Somebody's left, crikey, we just need someone in, like, and it's awful, it's painful. They're bearing those costs now because 2 years ago, they didn't have the conversations they needed to. They didn't make the investment in helping that team work together well. Yeah, they didn't figure out, okay, what are the most important capabilities that we need, and how do we grow that internally and add in a measured way over time? All of this pain could have been avoided, yeah, if we would have done 2 years ago. That's a direct quote from the MD of the business last week, yeah, when we just come out of a really chewy board session. Yeah, we don't get to pick any path that is devoid of cost, risk, or downside. We just get to pick which ones we have, right? So with that frame, I'd love to make the case that you just consider this. I think let's be measured, let's be pragmatic, right? Every 3 to 4 years, this isn't something you do all the time, right? But every 3, 4, maybe 5 years, you need to do 2 things. Number 1 is do some kind of board alignment exercise, right? Are we, it doesn't have to be a big blown out thing, it's not a very long project, it's a couple of days. Where are we as a board in terms of what we believe, where we think the business is going, how aligned are we on the key tenets of the next 5 years of this business? So many boards just never have those kind of conversations because they're just operationally, just making the wheel spin faster. And the second thing is consider some kind of executive development project. Every couple of years just to raise that level of tier 2 talent up. Yeah? And give yourself a fighting chance of avoiding the panic hires that you would otherwise bring in. Okay, in summary, here's the case that I would love to leave you with. I think succession planning, ideally, needs to get removed from our lexicon. Fine, we need to talk about it in context just to help people access what we mean, but very quickly, we need to pivot and take the conversation away from something that has edges of internal competition, yeah, and replacing the people who are no longer. Let's just lose that baggage by not using the term. Yeah, let's talk about executive development. It is dangerous, but it is essential. Number 2, develop the right things. Yeah, don't invest endlessly in technical and delivery skill sets, even though your management team will be screaming at you because they don't understand it. We need to be smart enough and brave enough to say we don't need a better accountant for our next FD. Yeah, our next salesperson, next sales director, it's not actually sales that makes them brilliant. It's their ability to manage a whole pool of Salesforce and release their genius. Right? That's what we need to get into them. And the third thing is to try where you can to avoid generic stuff. Honestly, if anyone ever hands you a handbook with a SWOT analysis in it, please just send it back across the table at them. Right? Particularly at that senior tier. We need to do better. Right? Let's not do generic. Let's think about, okay, what does development look like inside of our organizations and do that really well. Okay. That's all I have. Thank you very much.